12 years trapped on a couch, the disturbing story of Lacey Fletcher. The cushions are indented, crumpled, and dark, like the folds of ancient, forgotten fabric. I trace my fingers along the seams, feeling the grit of dust beneath my nails. 12 years is a long time to sink into a place, long enough for the world outside to become a myth, for shadows to become companions. The air smells of stale sweat and a faint, sickly sweet rot that I can never quite place. My nostrils flare, pulling in the scent as if it were an old friend. The peeling wallpaper around me tells tales of faded colors, once bright, now muted and cracked, just like my memories. My face is a mosaic of despair and defiance, marred by the faint outlines of tears that were shed so many years ago. I remember the cloying touch of the plastic that wrapped around me, each day growing tighter, strangling my freedom, my hope. The plush fabric of the couch has become a second skin, its embrace both familiar and monstrous. My body has become a map, and the channels of dust and grime are the lines, gnawing, leading me to the edges of my bodily and spiritual capabilities. How far can I go? The faint echo of distant footsteps reaches me, muffled and elusive. I hadn't heard them in so long that I almost didn't recognize them. They are like whispers in a language I once knew but now barely understand. My heart quickens, a solitary drumbeat in a sea of silence. I try to move, but my limbs feel heavy like weights pulling me back into the abyss of stillness. My muscles ache, sore and unused, as if the movement itself is an act of rebellion. The television is my only window to the outside world. The screen flickers, its light dancing erratically, casting shadows that writhe and twist, mocking me. All the pretty girls, all the grown women, all the handsome boys and men, all the crucial milestones that evaporated like fog from my life, no going back. News reports, melodramatic, inform me of stories I no longer relate to. They are a world apart, a reminder of the cruelty of losing my life, and yet a sedating sleeping pill. It's like only I am real, and they are a childhood cartoon playing in the background while I drift away in my sleep knowing I am real. Then it happens. The shattering of routine, a clang of metal against metal. The front door bursts open, and for a moment, a gust of fresh air invades the stale confines of my prison. The sounds of bustling activity, voices sharp and authoritative, pierce through the oppressive silence. I try to call out, but my voice is a raspy whisper, choked by 12 years in the same spot on the same couch. Is she in here? The voice is stern, decisive. I can almost see the figure at the door, outlined by the light that spills in like liquid gold. At this moment, I know that I am no longer allowed to be the same person, and my existence as I know it is threatened. There is no way back. My earliest memories are tinted with a soft, hazy light, like looking through fogged glass. My parents, Tom and Lisa, were a couple wrapped in quiet despair, their days punctuated by the low murmur of arguments, their nights stretching long in silence. They had dreams once, like everyone does, but those dreams wore thin and unraveled as time wore on. I was their final attempt at happiness, the last stitch in a frayed fabric. It was in my 10th year that the couch became a fixture in our home. They called it the comfort chair, a name steeped in ironic cruelty. I remember the day it arrived. Tom, with his usual air of exasperated resignation, carried it into the living room. Lisa, with her eyes glazed over from the countless disappointments, barely registered its arrival. I was left to examine it, a monstrous, imposing thing, its fabric dark and velvety, comforting. In the beginning, it was simple. I was grounded for petty offenses and sent to the couch as a punishment. I hated it, but found security in the routine. My world shrank to the size of this cushioned prison. Over time, the couch became more than a punishment. It was an escape from the growing tension in our household. I would sink into its folds, burying myself in its depths, where my world was muffled and distorted, and yet it was also fantastical, like clouds beaming from ideas and imagination, shape-shifting, pouring with relief, ever-changing in their color palette. As the years progressed, the reasons for my confinement changed. They became less about punishment and more about convenience. I was out of sight, out of mind, an afterthought in their lives. The couch was no longer just a chair. It was my existence, my cell, my world. My parents rarely spoke to me, their conversations conducted with the air of people who had forgotten how to communicate with each other, let alone with their daughter. The process was gradual, an erosion rather than a violent shift. I grew accustomed to the lack of contact, the steady, creeping silence that replaced words. The walls of my world grew thicker, built from layers of dust, decay, and unspoken words. It was like I could grasp them physically like bricks and throw them with all my strength, sweat, and tears, but it simply never manifested. Each day blended into the next, a monotonous stream of gray, punctuated only by the occasional flicker of the television. The screen became my window, though the world it showed was distant, unreal. News broadcasts and daytime soaps offered glimpses of lives I no longer recognized. Each newscaster's voice, each melodramatic scene was a reminder of a world I had lost access to. I watched, detached, my fingers grazing the crumbs and grime that accumulated in the folds of the couch. Years passed and the light dimmed further. The isolation was a dense fog, and I wandered through it, disoriented and numb. My physical needs became secondary to my mental state. Hunger was a distant concept. Thirst was an afterthought. The couch provided an insidious comfort, its embrace growing tighter as my own body withered away. My parents' visits became rarer, their faces blurring into one another. They were like ghosts fading in and out of my reality. I began to imagine conversations that never happened, arguments that only existed in my mind. Some were recollections, but then I didn't really know anymore. The couch absorbed every inch of my mind. Every mark and stain became me. Occasionally, there would be moments of clarity, fleeting instances when I was aware of the horror surrounding me. I would feel the cold grip of reality, like fingers tightening around my throat. The house would creak with unfamiliar sounds, and I would catch brief glimpses of sunlight seeping through the grime-covered windows. In those moments, I wanted to scream, to reach out, but the weight of my confinement held me down. Bugs had been the first to come. Tiny, relentless invaders burrowed into my skin, leaving trails of bites that never healed. They thrived in the filth, their presence a constant torment as they crawled over and within me. I felt their legs, sharp and alien, scuttling across my skin, their bites a never-ending agony. My muscles atrophied, shrinking to mere shadows of their former strength. The pain was constant, a dull throb that echoed through my bones. I tried to move, but each attempt was met with searing pain, my body protesting the very thought of freedom. Pressure sores formed, deep and festering wounds that ate away at my flesh. The stench of rotting skin filled the air, a sickly sweet odor that clung to everything. Infection set in, spreading through my body like a dark plague. My skin became a mottled landscape of pus and decay, the sores growing deeper, exposing bone in some places. The pain was unbearable, a constant, gnawing presence that consumed my every thought. I could feel the bacteria feasting on my flesh, their relentless hunger. The isolation was maddening. Sometimes the only sounds were the buzzing of flies, the scurrying of rodents, and my own labored breathing. I would think of the world outside. How come you abandoned me? How come I lived in you for 24 years and you gave up on me? How come you didn't look for me? How come you saw the color of my eyes? You heard the rhythm of my breath. You felt my warmth in our shared company. You smelled and tasted the same air as me, and still, you killed me. Is she in here? The voice is stern, decisive. I can almost see the figure at the door, outlined by the light that spills in like liquid gold. It's a stark contrast to the dim haze I've grown accustomed to. The sudden intrusion is both terrifying and exhilarating. They come closer, their footsteps louder, more insistent. I want to move, to stand and face them, but my body is a cage, bound by years of inertia. I hear them talking, officers, medics, voices filled with disbelief and determination. Their words cut through the thick fog of my confinement. Hands, warm and strong, reach out, touching my shoulder. I flinch, but their touch is tender, reassuring. I look up and see faces full of concern, eyes wide with a mixture of horror and pity. The first thing I feel is the jarring shift from the oppressive embrace of the couch to the hard, unfamiliar touch of hands. They are rough but gentle, handling me with an almost reverent care. The light is blinding, searing through the filth-encrusted haze that has been my only reality for years. I try to shield my eyes, but the sudden brightness overwhelms me, forcing me to confront the world I had long forgotten. The hands belong to strangers, men and women in uniforms, their faces a blur of concern and professional detachment. I feel them lifting me, their movements awkward as they navigate the labyrinth of the couch's creases and folds, where my body has melded into the fabric. The weight of my own flesh feels foreign, each muscle screaming in protest as I am pulled into the cold, sterile air of the room. My skin, once a pale imitation of its former self, is now a canvas of sores and abrasions. The couch had been a breeding ground for infection, deep, festering wounds hidden beneath layers of grime. The texture of my skin is no longer smooth. It is a mottled landscape of red, raw patches interspersed with darker, necrotic areas. My hair is matted, a tangled mess of grease and debris that falls in clumps as they move me. Bugs, tiny and relentless, crawl over my skin, biting and burrowing into my flesh. I can feel their tiny legs scuttling over me as I am truly being taken care of for the first time. As they lift me out, I feel the sharp sting of the air against my exposed flesh. Every touch is a shock, each movement a jolt through my emaciated limbs. The paramedics try to speak to me. Their voices feel like angels stretching through another dimension, urging me to respond, to hold on. I cannot muster more than a ragged breath and a faint murmur. The journey to the hospital is a blur of harsh lights and sterile smells. I am wrapped in a blanket, the warmth of which is both comforting and strange. The ride is a dissonance of unfamiliar sounds, beeping monitors, muffled conversations, the hum of the engine. My body, unused to such stimuli, reacts with a series of involuntary tremors. In the emergency room, I am greeted by medical professionals. They examine me with deep-rooted care, and shame floods me in excruciating waves. I want to fold my body together. Each touch, each probe is accompanied by a careful explanation, though I am too disoriented to fully understand. The wounds are cleaned with meticulous attention. The process is painful, each swipe of antiseptic sending waves of agony through my sensitive skin. The physical treatment is only part of the recovery. I am introduced to a world of therapies, physical, occupational, psychological. Each session is a battle of my soul and physical limitations. The physical therapists work to restore the function of my limbs, guiding me through movements that feel both alien and excruciatingly familiar. The occupational therapists help me relearn basic skills, tasks that once seemed effortless. My sessions with therapists are agonizing and leave me feeling sore, delving into the dark recesses of my mind. They help me confront the psychological scars of isolation and neglect, a process fraught with emotional upheaval, for it left a giant mountain for me to dig through. The nightmares come frequently, vivid, unrelenting visions of the couch, of darkness and bugs, of the endless monotony. Each session forces me to confront these fears, that it is okay to get my hands and feet dirty in the process of deconstructing this mountain. It is the only way I will be able to see what is on the other side of it. My body, though freed from its physical prison, must contend with the long-term effects of immobility. My muscles need to be retrained, my skin healed, and every day is a struggle to reclaim a sense of normalcy. But I am surrounded by support. My path is burning bright, and this time, it is not in my skin but in the gorgeous skyline. Every evening I anticipate the moment it explodes in warm, vibrant colors, hanging there briefly like nature's fireworks. At the same time, justice is served. It is not a balm for the wounds, merely an acknowledgement of the wrongs. The legal battles are intense, the exposure raw. They make me feel like a ghost, as if I am no one, simply a number or a case, a past event. Testimonies, evidence, and the media's unrelenting gaze are all part of the painful journey toward closure. My parents face prison time, but they cannot undo the years lost or fully compensate for the suffering endured. That was my life. They made sure my life was nothing. As I move forward, the healing is an ongoing process, a careful walk between succumbing to existence and choosing experience. Each day is a step toward reclaiming my life, my identity. I can't tell you who I truly am, because I could be a million people. The couch is gone, but its legacy remains in many ways I can't bear to think of for too long at a time, even as I actively decide to process it. So I take my time. Who knows where I will be in 12 years from now?